Hello, my friends. I'm State Representative Tom Calter, and this is another episode of Issues of the Day. Folks, this is a program that is unlike most. We bring issues before you that people talk about in coffee shops, they talk about in their homes, but perhaps they're not as comfortable talking about in public. They're issues that affect police, fire, town budgets. Perhaps they affect things like our seniors, our special needs children, our veterans returning homes that don't have jobs. The issues that face our society that perhaps people feel uncomfortable talking about. I see that as my role as a legislator, to bring those issues to you and to share information, because I believe that with good information and with knowledge comes less fear. So today I'm joined by two great friends and two extraordinary leaders in our community, Chief Bradley and Chief Botieri, Chief of Fire and Chief of Police from the town of Plymouth. And the reason I've asked them to join us on this particular show is to talk about the epidemic that is this heroin epidemic, or more generally, opiate epidemic. It's killing children, it's killing young men and women, it's killing professionals, it's killing people on the outskirts of our society and right at the center of our society. It knows no boundaries. And I have been running forums throughout Plymouth County almost monthly. I did one in West Bridgewater the other night, intend to do one in Brockton next month, to share information with parents on what their children are being confronted with. So it's a parents-only forum. And if you look at my website, you'll see where the next one is being held. If you're a parent with questions, I'd encourage you to attend. So I would like to start off this very important session by introducing to you my two guests. Again, Chief Botieri, and first, and Michael is our Chief of Police, Michael, and I thank you for joining us here today. Michael, I'd like you to focus, if you wouldn't mind, on why this problem has become such an epidemic. And I guess the two sub-questions are, what are we doing to combat it in terms of finding the bad guys? Because we all want to get at the bad guys. Sure. And what are we doing to help those who are sick, who are, CPAs and lawyers and business people and otherwise great people who are ill and they're doing these drugs? So, sure. Michael, help us with that.
Sure, Tom. Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate that, and it's a topic that we really want to talk about. We don't want to leave this, in the back room and not discuss it. So the fire chief and I have done these forums quite a few times. It's an obvious issue with opiates, where we believe a lot of it started with opiate prescription medications, where we all have prescription medications where we do not take the entire 30-day allotment, and unfortunately it gets in the hands of the kids and they will start ingesting that, and then slowly but surely they'll end up getting into something as serious as heroin, and sometimes that's laced with something that causes death. We've seen a lot in Plymouth. I think it's throughout the entire Commonwealth and throughout the entire country. What we've done in Plymouth and what we looked at back early summer was the establishment of a street crimes unit. We tailored that after a street crimes unit that exists in Barnstable, and it's a multifaceted type of an approach. These are plainclothes officers that can be visible and not visible when we don't want them to be. And they're out there combating these issues, so when they come up. Some of the reasons that we needed that unit and why we think we can help in order to, our goal is to help the people. These are young people. We're seeing them from their teens all the way to their 50s. Right. The fire chief will talk a little bit about statistics, but I can say we've had, I believe at this point, 13 deaths in Plymouth this year only that we've attributed to heroin overdoses. And then several other
13 deaths.
Several other issues that the fire chief will talk about as far as Narcan and his officers and the Brewster ambulance, what they're dealing with. So the street crimes unit, one of the main reasons is, Massachusetts is a permissive state or commonwealth, if you will. If you look back 2009, hypodermic needles are legalized. That was a tool for us to place someone under arrest and not to throw away the key, but maybe intervene and get them help. There's no room for intervention. So those are legal now. We don't have that ability. The Good Samaritan law that was changed not long ago that says, and I understand the reasoning for it, the police department cannot charge someone with a possession charge if they're actively overdosing. We want to encourage that call. We want to save the person. I understand the reason of the law. However, it doesn't allow us to intervene. We'll go to a scene, and we have on several occasions, dozens of occasions where maybe the needle's still in the person's arm. We collect the heroin, we collect the needle. The person is either Narcaned or, in all cases, brought to the hospital and released the next day. And we have some cases where we have Narcaned someone 3 times in a 72-hour period, twice within the same day.
Wow.
Sometimes. And I would say, because there's no way of us to intervene, our street crimes unit that we created has one supervisor, Sergeant Chris Butler. They've done phenomenal work. I'm very proud of the work they've done. Close to 200 arrests in the last 5.5 months. Now, that's a nice stat, and it sounds good, and I'm happy that they're working and we're bringing a lot of people in. But that's not the statistic I'm looking at. I'm looking at the families that we're saving and we're helping. Because when they go out, the narcotics, these officers in the street crimes unit go out, and they find someone in a parking lot or an alleyway, using heroin, they'll make the arrest and we charge them with the possession. And then we get them to the court, and Judge Minahan has a very successful drug court in Plymouth. So the number and the people and the statistics, although a couple hundred arrests is a lot of work, and the guy's doing a great job with it. The statistic I want to make sure people realize is that 1, 2, or 3 families who have already affected. We've brought those people. My street crimes unit are saving lives. We're getting the people because we're able to intervene by charging them. And families are coming to us saying that was the best thing you could have ever done is arrest my son for doing, or my daughter for doing heroin in a parking lot, because now they're working, they're on the right, they're on the right track. That's what we want to do, but we need to intervene and we need to work with them on that.
Michael, I want to talk a little bit more about specialty drug court, and then we're going to move on to Chief Bradley, and I'd like you to speak to this, if you wouldn't mind, with your personal experience.
Sure.
In Plymouth, folks, Judge Rosemary Minahan created a specialty drug court. It was the first of its kind right here at Plymouth County and the Plymouth District Court. And what Judge Minahan has been able to set up is a program under which an otherwise good person who committed a crime to support their drug habit, who ends up before her for having committed that crime, will take into consideration the person's illness as an addict, and will literally confront that person and say, do you want us to deal with you as an ill person or as the criminal and hold you accountable for the crime you committed? And a life decision has to be made there, because it could be an otherwise law-abiding citizen, it could be an accountant, a lawyer, a businessman, a school teacher who got addicted to heroin by virtue of getting addicted to an opiate for good reason, for pain management, and that progresses on up to the less expensive drug or heroin. And if that person wants to get help and wants to save their own lives and their reputation and their record, the police work closely with the courts in order to save that life. One statistic, and then I want to ask Mike to weigh in on this before we move to Bill. Now the legislature has provided funds to create drug courts in the other counties. Yeah. In counties where there is a functioning drug court, specialty drug court, there is a 7% recidivism rate where they will go back to drugs. In counties where they do not have a specialty drug court, there is a 78% recidivism rate, which means they will go right back into the process. Michael, what's your experience before drug court?
Absolutely. It's an extraordinary difference. The drug court is so successful, and that's why even if we only bring a half a dozen people to the court, we know we're going to save quite a few of those people. Maybe one of them will go back, and maybe none, but we're going to have a great success. When the drug court first came in, I know that one of the main objection's the wrong word, but one of the main groups of people that had a little bit of issue with the attorneys, because the attorney of the day is representing someone for a possession charge, and their job is clearly to represent that person in the best light possible. In order to get in this program, you have to basically admit sufficient facts that you were in possession of heroin or opiate. And it was tough to get them over that, but the attorneys have come to a point where they're kind of on board, and they're also a group that they're a stakeholder as well, and they're people, they're parents, and they get it. So it took a little bit of time in the beginning, but they understand that, and they will have a client come to them and they'll say, you're a perfect candidate. You can't have any violent crime record. There's some criteria, first offense, that type of stuff, but there's a great pool of people that qualify, and now that the attorneys that represent them understand the program, because it's difficult for an attorney to advise a client to admit sufficient facts, admit that you did, let's go this route, because if you fail, in the program, and this is probably one of the main reasons a lot of people don't, they reserve the right to go back and actually charge you. Now, you've already admitted the facts.
If they fail. If
Yeah,
they
so
fail
the,
a drug
so the
test.
attorneys, felt like that was a little bit of a conflict, like we're admitting that we're going to have a shot, but if we don't make it, you reserve the right to come back. But that's the only way you can do it, and it's extraordinarily successful. I'm proud of Rosemary Minahan and what she's done for the community and the entire county, and it should be mirrored in a lot of other counties.
One more word on that. If any mother, father, husband, wife has got a concern about a loved one being involved with opiates and with heroin in particular, and you see a behavior that's changing, checks are missing,
Absolutely.
Money's missing, assets are being sold that you don't know anything about, and that is typically going towards supporting that addiction. Go down to the Plymouth District Court, and they have drug court, I think 3 days a month.
3 years.
And watch what they do. You'll see the justices down there, along with Rosemary Minahan, but she's very fun to watch, where she will say to the person, today's your day. You're going to determine the rest of your life. We can treat you like the criminal that you are, or we can arrange for the help that you need. And if you can stay off drugs for a period of time, a year, 2 years, 3 years, then we will drop this charge and you'll be reintegrated back into society. And now we've now seen the product of that program, and it's very edifying. And if you go down there, although the situation is tragic, her approach is
dynamic. She's
very dynamic. That's the right word.
She really is.
That's very dynamic.
Absolutely.
Chief Bradley, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for what your people are doing. I read countless stories of the lives that you're saving. And my question for you, Chief, to begin with is, Michael's responsibility, and he's doing it so well, is to find the bad guys that are causing this epidemic and to deal with them and to bring justice. And to assist the citizens of Plymouth who are sick and seeing if we can get their lives back on track. And I think his department is a role model in Plymouth County. Your role, Chief, is to save lives at the worst possible moment. I've got a son who's a police officer and a son who's a medic, and at the stroke of midnight, New Year's Eve, they were both administering Narcan. And one victim made it, and one victim did not. That's now an everyday occurrence for your people. How are you dealing with this, Chief?
Well, we deal with it by doing a lot of training with our people, and we made arrangements for them to start carrying Narcan back in February of this year. That was prior to the governor declaring the epidemic emergency. That was at the end of March. And prior to that time, it was difficult for first responders to start carrying Narcan. It was a tool that had been used for 20-something years as far as a paramedic or an EMT, but not in the hands of first responders. So it was a cumbersome project to get into it, but we saw I had started to know some statistics at the end of 2013, and talking with Chief Botieri, he had said he had felt the same thing. We started paying more attention to reading reports and talking to crews out in the street.
You felt the wave coming.
We felt it coming because we had been reading about it, but you never, it always seems like it's the other place. It's not your own hometown.
Right. So
I had asked the ambulance service, I said, I want to get all the stats at the end of December in 2013 of what had gone on for the year. And we had seen 95 overdoses, and their crews had used Narcan 65 times successfully. And I thought that was a high number. I look at that number December 1st of this year, from January to this year, and the number was 277 on Monday morning, overdoses that we had responded to, and they had used Narcan 107 times. Now, not all of them were successful. As the chief said, there was 13 deaths in the town. Some of those there just wasn't somebody to call in time to get help. When they overdose, the opiate attaches to some of the sensors in the brain and shuts down their breathing. You have a very short window to save someone's life. You have 6 minutes. So for somebody to come along, find them in that period of time and get a response out, it's remarkable that we've had as many saves as we have, because things have to just fall in line perfectly for this to happen. But it's such a tough addiction. The people, they just can't help themselves. I remember early on, one of the first cases when my people started carrying Narcan in February, they used it on a 20-year-old in his home, and his mother and father were there. And of course, the mother and father were crying because they were watching their son not breathing. And afterwards, they told my people, they confided in my people, it was the third time that they had watched CPR being performed on their son due to an overdose. So we recommended to them You need to get help. And they said, we have been. We've gone to our insurance carrier. We've sent them off to a program. But the programs have to be, for this type of addiction, have to be much longer, much more intense than they are for alcoholism or some of the others. And they weren't getting good results. So the only other choice is to go to the courts. And of course, they know that, but they don't want to do this. It's the toughest thing in the world for a parent to do is bring their child and have them arrested and have them locked up. It's either that or we have to keep coming back. And that particular one did follow that advice and went through the court system. And
it's important, Chief, I think, given what you just said, for our listeners to know that the legislature passed a bill in July in response to the epidemic, which, first of all, allows them to have Narcan at home. Yes. If they know their son or daughter is an addict. And a lot of people do know that. We think that nobody knows. Remember when we were kids, you never knew. No. Nobody talked about it. It was never in the home. People now know. And they can have Narcan. They can train both the nasal and the injection. That's number one. Number two, $20 million was allocated to open up treatment centers because you're right. 3 days in a detox doesn't do anything for heroin. No. And so now there are more treatment facilities, more funding for treatment facilities that are available. And you just touched on what Michael just said about the courts. If you bring your son or daughter before the courts, what's it called, Michael? Section 30,
Section 35,
where that young man or young woman or your mother, your father, your sister, your brother is in danger of hurting themselves or others, you can petition the court. Is it through the police department or directly to the court?
Either way, mainly through the court, but we would facilitate that.
You facilitate the movement
correct.
Of the person.
That's correct.
To be sectioned, people say incarcerated, to be forced to receive treatment. But it didn't do any good before because the programs weren't there to provide the treatment.
Correct.
Now the programs are there.
Yes, yeah.
Now the programs are there.
And they're working. These more intense programs seem to be helping the people a lot more than what we were seeing in the past years. Absolutely.
Chief, both chiefs, for both of you, I always like these programs to be somewhat instructional. What can people take away from what we say? If there's a member of your community and their son or daughter, their mother or father, sister or brother are addicts, they haven't committed any crime yet, other than, they're buying heroin.
Right.
Can they do anything proactively? Can they contact you, Chief Botieri, or you, Chief Bradley, and say, look, we want to get out in front of this thing. It's a problem.
Sure. Well, as far as the police are concerned, we're going to be there for anyone who has this type of issue. We would encourage you to come forward. We're going to talk it through with you. I'm going to tell you that the main ability for you to get help would be, we just touched on it, is using the courts. The best scenario would be that you get your loved one and you talk them into it through some type of intervention where they voluntarily get the treatment. That's a perfect world. It's probably unlikely. It's probably going to be difficult to do. So what you need is you need mandated you need mandated therapy or mandated intervention.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what the court will do. We will come if you get what's called a warrant apprehension through a Section 35, and we will facilitate bringing your child to the court. Typically, we don't even bring them to the station and book them because there is no charge.
And it is traumatic.
It is. And
you're
we don't
going into the home
right,
and forcibly or
and we'll
voluntarily.
handcuff and bring them. It's a warrant. It's a warrant to provide that body in front of the judge.
But it's important, Michael, for you to say it again. You've said it once. They're not arrested.
They're not arrested. It's not a crime. There is no prosecution. There's no charge. They could be handcuffed if they had to be, if they're combative, and that with the warrant of apprehension gives us that ability. So you need to bring yourself, the doctors involved, any information to the court, and you would just petition the court for that to be issued. And when it's issued, we're sensitive to that. We'll work with you in getting the child there, and then the mandated help kicks in. But the only interaction with the police is we're a facilitator. We're just going to assist in getting your child or your loved one to the court, and the court will mandate the help, and we're out of it. So look at us as a resource in that case. Don't look at us in a negative light.
So important for people to know that. My friends, it's very important that we say that again. The chief and his department, his staff are facilitators to intervene on a problem in your home or in your family.
Absolutely.
To bring that ill, sick person, the addict, we hate the word, don't we?
Yeah.
But the addict, into the courts, not to prosecute them for a crime, but to facilitate the type of help with their cooperation or without their cooperation, so that they can get the help they need. And again, I'm going to say it one more time. Until recently, the funding wasn't in place to send them to a treatment program.
Correct.
So the police got very frustrated because they'd enforce a Section 35. The courts would send them to a program, but instead of it being a 180-day program, it's a 3-day program, which did no good. Now the money's in place, and the specialty courts and the Plymouth District Court do an extraordinary job of matching up the need with the resource. Chief, how about you? If there's an addict in a home, can a mom or dad call you and ask you about Narcan? Because they can now have it in the home.
Yes, absolutely. And as an emergency, right away, steps you can do is to get Narcan so that you have that, and just in case there's an overdose, and you can do something about it right away. Next best thing is communication. You have to sit and talk with them. And you may not get the answers right out front, but you know your own children, and you know your family. You can tell when you're being led on, you're not getting the right information.
Right.
And you can look around the house and see what's happening and talk to their friends. You have to be a part of their life, and not their friend. You have to be their parent. But obviously, you can come to
well said.
You can come to anyone on the fire department or the EMS, and we can give you advice. But you have to intervene. It has to be done. And probably the worst thing in your life, if you get to that last resort of taking them to court, you'll look back 6 months later and you'll say, my God, I should have done that earlier.
They saved their life.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about 2 more things with whatever time we have left. The first one is the pathway to heroin. People don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to start doing heroin today.
Absolutely not.
And the second thing I want to talk to, and I'll address it first, is the stigma. Just what we talked about. In getting involved with the police to come get your son or daughter, to bring them to the courts. Nobody ever viewed the police as coming to your house as a good thing. Right. Nobody ever viewed going in front of a judge as a good thing. Right. And I think that time has changed.
Absolutely. I think it had to change, and it has to continue to change. And we want the citizens to realize that we're a stakeholder, but we want to be part of that collaboration. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. If people think the police will just make more arrests, and there's no way we can arrest ourselves out of this problem.
Michael, I really admire you for that position.
It's a team. It's a collaboration, and we want to be part of that team. We're going to do everything we can to minimize that stigma. To a point where, if in fact there was a situation where it was communicated to us that we could use an unmarked car and a detective to bring someone down, if a uniform officer was traumatic to the family or to the subject themselves, why would we not do that?
Right,
so I want people to know we're open to that. We're not just pick up the phone and we're going to come and cause a problem. We don't want to. We want to be part of that collaboration, part of that team.
That's real public service, Michael. Ed, I want to talk a little bit about the pathway now.
Sure.
My brother died a couple of years ago of a very painful form of pancreatic cancer.
Yes.
In the last year of his life, he lived with great dignity and pain-free because he was on OxyContin.
Yep.
And that was the intended use for that drug.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story, and then I'd ask you to weigh in and speak to this. Many of the tragedies, many of the funerals I've attended in the past year, and the reason I've made this important work for me is they're college kids, they're recent graduates, they're young professionals, and their addiction began with some sort of sports injury.
Yes.
And the doctor is prescribing for pain management an OxyContin or oxycodone or Percocet, an opiate. And it gives them the required, the desired relief for the pain. Right. And that should be period, end of story, right? Yeah. The problem is, during that process, the drug is so strong. If the young person, husband, wife, mother, father, doesn't have the patient advocate that we provide for our families, that most people can or should provide for their families, then an addiction forms because they're on the drug longer than prescribed. Sure. Or longer than necessary. So all of a sudden, they can't get any more from the doctor because he or she is beginning to understand there's a problem.
Yes.
And until recent legislation, they could go to another doctor and get a different prescription.
Right. That's been corrected. Yeah.
Or they could go into the medicine cabinet at home, or their friend's home, or their friend's friend's home, or their grandmother's home, and find unused prescriptions. And all of a sudden, they've run out of all of that, so they start buying it on the street. And to buy an oxy pill on the street is $80. Can't afford that for too long. And then one of two things happens. They either commit a crime, therefore they end up in Michael's arena, being arrested for the crime of B&E. You see these B&Es now, you see these bank robberies, and you see the poor people up there, they're just passing a note. They're doing it in the middle of the day now. They don't even know.
Right.
And they get caught and they get treated as a criminal because not everybody has a drug court. Or they say, I'm not going to commit a crime, but I can't afford $80 a day, so I'm going to move up to a stronger drug that I can buy for $4 a hit. And that's heroin. And from the moment they take it, the addiction gets stronger and stronger and stronger. They need more and more and more, and that's when they overdose.
I think you just explained it perfectly.
Yes.
It happens
right,
every
Ed?
day.
I mean, I think you just explained it perfectly.
There was a shift in the medical field.
It's a common pathway.
Yeah.
A number of years ago, where pain management, which is the term we use, and for good reasons, there were people that needed to have that control. Nowadays, a kid playing baseball or softball or hockey in high school gets a broken bone, and they're giving them opiates. Now, when I was a kid, I broke my hand, my arm, and my leg, skiing, different things. I didn't get opiates.
They gave us ice cream.
Yes, yeah. Ice, elevate it and stay off of it, and maybe Bufferin, aspirin.
Yeah.
But it became the norm to help people manage their pain. And there's so much pressure on these kids when they're in high school and in college to play sports and get back in there again. They'll do anything. And unfortunately and unwillingly, the doctors have let them that. I have talked with a couple of people who have recovered from it, and that was one of the ways. And another one was, and this particular man right now is 21 years old, and he's kicked the habit. Been 2 years now free. He started because he was actually an alcoholic. He drank heavily every night. He woke up in the morning, had to go to work to get money to buy more alcohol. Sure. Had a terrible hangover. One of his friends had a cure for that, heroin. Made him feel great. He became a heroin addict because he started drinking. So there are ties to other
pathways.
Yes.
We've got 2 minutes left. I think we need to speak to something that our citizens can do. The best, most fertile source of drugs is right in our home, in our medicine cabinets. I would encourage every citizen of the town, I'm sure you have the drop-off program.
We have a med drop box.
I'd ask every citizen in the town
lobby
to go through this weekend their medicine cabinet and their mother's medicine cabinet, their grandmother's medicine cabinet, get rid of all unwanted drugs, and Michael's going to tell you where to bring those drugs.
Absolutely. We have a medical drop box right in the lobby of the police station. You come in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only thing we cannot put in there would be hypodermic needles or liquid. Any other medicine, any other medication. And the townspeople and the people in this area do care, and I think if we could just close by mentioning the Candlelight Vigil tomorrow on Sunday.
Please do, Michael.
America's Hometown Against Heroin is a group that's come forward. Kim Hillman is the lead person that I've spoken to about this, and they're going to be conducting a Candlelight Vigil, and that's going to be on Sunday at 4:30. It's at the United Methodist Church on Carver Road. Do you know the number, Ed?
29 Carver Road.
29 Carver Road.
It might give the date, if you will, because this will be played over and over again.
That would be today's the 12th, the 14th.
14th.
Sunday the 14th at 4:30, and we'd encourage people to come out. They're going to talk about people we've lost, and she's going to explain about things to look for, and we're going to be there in support. I know the fire department, myself, and Tom says he's going to be there, so we expect a good show.
Vinny's attending as well.
Great.
We're all in this together, folks. Listen, we have 1 minute left, and before we sign off, I sincerely want to thank both of you. Michael, in the law enforcement area, you've been a leader in Plymouth County in combating this. And the way you approach community policing is, in my view, if we did that throughout the country, we wouldn't have the kinds of problems we've had throughout this country. So I thank you for your leadership on this issue. Chief, your people are saving folks every day.
Yes.
All I'm going to say to you and your team is hang in there. And the bad guys are coming to justice, and the victims are going to be fewer and fewer every year. And until that time, let's keep the good guys alive as we solve this problem.
And we will.
Folks, we're going to wrap up, and I want to thank both chiefs, Bradley and Botieri, for joining me today. Again, this is another issue that others would like not to talk about, and these gentlemen have the courage to do so. I would close by asking you that if you have a person in your family that is suffering from addiction, don't worry about the stigma. If your son or daughter is suffering from diabetes or heart disease or cancer, you'd stand on top of your roof and you'd scream for whatever help you can get. That's how we're going to win this thing. The legislature's done its part. Fire and police are doing their part. Parents are doing their part. Judge Rosemary Minahan and the courts are doing their part. This is an entire full-scale assault on this epidemic. So if you've got a member of your family who you love who's in trouble, then don't hesitate to reach out to anybody that can help. And don't worry about who finds out. Together we can solve this problem. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Issues of the Day, and have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. Thank you.